people, come back. Okay, some more people coming back.
Oh, Gio's here.
Oh, someone was like, oh, that looks like a really nice mimosa, and I want to like PSA for a second and say that Gramps is doing like to-go margaritas, frozen ones.
I already drank mine.
Yeah. So you can just go to Gramps. They have this like responsible social distance window, and then they'll just sell you a frozen margarita. Okay. So, aphids. Did you want to say anything else? No. Let's not talk about aphids anymore. No.
Well, I just want to talk about that one. I mean, there's a lot of people that know that the ladybug larvae eat the aphids.
Oh, okay, we're back. Never mind.
So the ladybugs. Everyone knows that ladybugs are. And,
Sorry. Ladybugs.
It's actually the ladybug larvae that are eating the aphids, and a really great way to get ladybugs into your garden without just buying them in a bag when they all fly away is to have small white flowers. So we always let our cilantro go to flower. There's plenty of small flowers. A lot of weeds have small flowers.
Biden's alba.
And it'll actually bring in, because a lot of these bugs that are beneficiaries like to feed on really small flowers, and so that brings them into the garden. I always see ladybugs feeding on my cilantro flowers, and then they're going and laying their eggs, and then there's ladybug larvae eating all the aphids that I have.
Yeah, the ladybug thing, I know people want to buy ladybugs to treat their aphids because they learn about it and it sounds cool, but if you don't have the proper environment for the ladybugs, and if you don't have enough aphids, like for example, 1 kale's worth of aphids isn't going to cut it, literally 20 minutes after you released store-bought ladybugs that were bred in a ladybug farm and then sent to you in the mail, and then you release them, they'll be gone. And they'll probably die.
It makes sense. Like, so many of our sort of suburban or like landscapes don't have like little flowers in them. They have like big showy flowers, or they have like, big waxy leaves, and tropicals and stuff like that. But having some of these little white flowers around, and little yellow, little pink, like, just think about it. Like, the more biodiversity you have, you got to invite everybody to the party in order to have a nice balanced ecosystem and have these beneficials in place.
Okay, talk about mealybugs while I go find some.
Mealybugs they're like aphids. I think their adult version like flies around. There's like all of these things have a ton of different species, so we kind of could get into the weeds too fast, and we don't even know them. We just know mealybugs. Often mealybugs will be kind of right at the base of the root, like well, sometimes they tangle up the foliage. They do that on hibiscus plants. Sometimes there's mealybugs that are down actually in the roots, like root aphids. I don't know how they get down there. I guess it's an amazing world. You find some over there? The annoying thing about mealybugs is I'm pretty sure they're also like scale, and they have like a covering that keeps most sprays from actually being effective. So once again, it may be a signal that the plant's just unhealthy and on its way out.
Look, you see, I know it's out of focus. They're basically like...
They're fuzzy.
Fuzzy white ovals. Fuzzy white ovals that don't move. And so people often don't think that they are bugs. But if you kind of stare at them, or you bother them, or you remove they make like a webbing around themselves as a protectant or whatever, then they will move a little bit. This one is moving just a little bit, but they're ovals, small or big, small or medium, that look fluffy. People will often say online, like, I think there's some cottony stuff on my plant, because they shroud themselves in a webbing as a protectant. But if you just have a few, you can rub them out. And if you have a lot of them, then you need to spray them with a Broadspectrum.
I don't think spraying works for them, to be honest. If you got really bad mealybugs, like something fundamentally is wrong, and like you need to adjust the nutrition or ditch that plant, or they're usually on sick plants that are also showing some other sort of problems, like usually nutritional problems. Guavas are one that usually gets them.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, let's move on.
But spider mites. I want to talk about spider mites.
lots of mites. Are we going to cover all the mites?
Okay, there's lots of mites, so let's just say mites. But basically, mites are really tricky because they are microscopic, so you cannot see them with the naked eye.
You can see their damage, though.
No, that's a leafhopper.
No, that's
okay.
This is mites.
Okay,
this is
so
like
look, but also they make different types of leaf damage on different types of plants. So they are sucking insects. That's a category of insect. Like it's the way that they feed. And so what this is, okay, a bunch of different pests will, some other pests will also make this damage, but this is really important damage to learn about. You see how these look like pixels? It's like they're squared off. What those light dots are is they are a sucking insect took its pincer or whatever, its pointy sucker, put it in one cell of your leaf and sucked the chlorophyll out of it. And then it left it empty and damaged and dead. And that's what that is. So mites do that and leafhoppers do that. So if you go over to your plant and it has a lot of this damage, and you walk by and a bunch of stuff flitters out of your plant.
Well, this is more indicative of flea hoppers. So it's similar.
Other
you can
side,
see that.
Right?
No, I wanted to show them the difference with the leaf hoppers than the mites is there's like frass. There's little black spots.
Yeah, poop. Well, we need to define that term. Frass means insect poop. Insect poop is frass. So if you are Googling, you'll be better off using that term. But so a leaf hopper, if a bunch of stuff like hops off of your plant when you walk by, then you might have a leaf hopper issue, but you don't notice because they're running away every time you come. Mites are microscopic. You can get a decent, like a cheapy microscope and you can look at them, or you can just, I'd say assume you have mites. It's kind of like they say that your skin you're covered in mites all the time. Gross and real. And I'd say that your plants are also kind of covered in mites all the time. That's one of the reasons why we actually sell plants that we know have mites sometimes, if they're not really bad, because we're like, this pest is a huge problem in Miami, but it doesn't kill your plant right away, or it has the potential. Your plant has the potential to outgrow it, and your plant has the potential to just survive living with a population of it, kind of like we live with populations of good and bad organisms inside our bodies. So I want to show you, it took me kind of a long time to figure this out when I was a novice gardener because I didn't have great resources. But you see this shrivelly, this is a pepper. You see the shrivelly tip. I noticed online that when people ask what this damage is, they're like, my plant is drying out because it looks like it's wilting or it's shriveling. It's actually, the term for this is strappy. So this plant has gotten strappy damage. And what's happening is, as the mite is sucking the chlorophyll out of the leaf of the pepper, instead of making the dot, it's making the leaf curl in a damaged, deformed way. What I would do with this plant is I would just remove the growing tip because they like the fresh growth the most. And then, like, if the plant ends up happy, it'll grow back like with no problem. Also, peppers really like being topped. They get bushier. So a lot of times my way of dealing with mites on a pepper is to just like pinch off the growing tip, but they live all over the leaf, including on the underside, and so you can also spray something like a neem oil. If you were a conventional farmer who didn't care about pesticides or integrated pest management, you would spray a miticide, because mites are a huge problem in growing plants for food. I'll show you, this is one of our favorite organic pesticides. The name of it is Pyganic. I guess it's backwards, but this is Pyganic, and it's the name of the pesticide is, the active ingredient is pyrethrum. It's made out of chrysanthemums, but it's very strong. Just because it's made out of chrysanthemums does not mean you can like drink it.
It doesn't mean it's cheap either.
And it's not cheap. This was $300. But you don't need anything this size. You can go on Amazon and get a really small one.
Or Johnny's. While we're plugging companies, Johnny's Seeds, Johnny's Selected Seeds has a lot of organic pesticides, and they have a lot of good write-ups, and so you can kind of see it all on one platform, kind of like almost all the organics that are available, and they're always getting the new ones. They're really concerned with that, so that's a really great place to learn about these pesticides.
There's also, someone said insecticidal soap. Okay, this is our insecticidal soap of choice. This is also super expensive at this scale. It's called MP. Okay, it's OMRI certified. It's OMRI also. Soap is a category, a scientific category of materials. It doesn't mean soap, like for your body. So a lot of people I see online, they're like, I sprayed my plant with soap, what next? They're using the word soap like pool guys use the word salt, right? They're like, chlorine is a salt, so like we're using chlorine in here. So these are soaps. They have like a lathering quality, and whatever thing is in the term soap, they qualify as a soap. That's what insecticidal soap means. It doesn't mean that you could take a soap from
All right, we got it.
Well, I'm just saying, like, because on the internet, people are like, spray it with soap. And then I feel like there's a lot of disconnect there with the definitions. But I also want to say, like, while we're talking about all these insecticides, these are all organic, which means they're coming from natural things, but they are broad spectrum. What broad spectrum means is that they will kill pretty much all hard or soft-bodied insects that are around.
I don't want to say hard, though. I'm going to disagree with you on that.
A lot of these say it.
I mean, there's a lot of things that you just can't kill, like.
Okay.
So,
but
like beetles. Beetles are like little tanks.
Okay, fine. Beetles are different. But what I'm trying to get at is like, I'm gonna get stung by this bee. What I'm trying to get at is that you may not want to use something that's going to kill every bug on your plant. If you're going to use these, like, you know, it's a decision you need to make for yourself and for your garden. A lot of people recommend spraying these types of things at night because the bees are inside, or bees aren't foraging during the night, which is, you know, so you're being a little bit more responsible with the population of some of your pollinators. Yeah. Right? But you're still, you know, you are still...
I don't know how I feel about being really partial to bees, just, you know, picking out one bug to be nice to them.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, it's a whole thing where people are like, I want to be nice to these bugs and I want to be mean to these bugs. Okay, so mites. Mites, you can think of as, like, they're everywhere, but every now and then their populations get out of control, and they're also a symptom, but they're also something that you can manage with, like, every now and then, like an application of a spray.
I think that was it. Jack's dead bug brew.
Captain Jack's Spinoside.
Spinoside is a good miticide.
It's not organic.
It's not organic. It's also what dogs take for fleas. But yeah.
Okay, whiteflies are another like really common pest.
They're kind of like aphids. They're kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, but the thing with whiteflies that I like to point out for people, whiteflies. You talk about them for a second. I'm gonna find a picture.
There are a lot of different types of whiteflies. They can affect, and they can get on your sweet potato. They can get on your bananas. They can get on your palms.
Hey, look. They look like this. It's like dust and black dots under your leaf. Those aren't whiteflies, but that's what you're gonna see when you have a whitefly issue.
Those are the baby whiteflies.
Babies and residue. And the adults are teeny tiny little white flies that when you brush your plant, like they'll all flutter out of it. And sometimes they look like maybe they're dust or something because they're so tiny that you can barely see their little wings flap. South Florida, we've got a whitefly problem because one of their favorite plants to live in are ficus. And Miami Miami went through a moment where everybody planted ficus as like the #1 hedging plant, like hedge plant. So there's like this really unnatural population of ficus here. And so if you have a really bad whitefly problem in your garden, it's not going to be enough to just like spray your plant and do some. You need to find the source.
Yeah, because we'll go back to like the thing, like when they're babies and they're in their little like sessile form, like glued to the little black thing under the white fuzz. You can't spray that. That's still gonna hatch. Like that, they have a little waxy covering that protects them from the soap. And so a lot of times, if it's just 1 or 2 plants, we'll rub them off with the thumbs. Or like the pepper plant, say your pepper plant gets like completely infested with the whitefly, we'll go and like literally defoliate the plant.
Yeah, you can take all the leaves
because then you're just cutting the population down to like 1 or 2, instead of like drenching your poor plant in like spray, which is actually not going to love. The plant has to breathe too.
Yeah. Sweet potatoes and peppers are the most whitefly prone plants in your garden, and whitefly are smart about their eggs. They want to lay them somewhere really safe and out of the way. So they're always going to put their babies and hang out on the underside of your leaf, and they're doing that on purpose. They're hiding from you. And so you can have a sweet potato, for example, a whole patch of sweet potato that look amazing, and then one day, like, your cat walks through them and like all these white flies come out and you're like, what the heck? And you turn over a leaf and you have like a crazy infestation. That's why we're saying, like, make sure that you farmer shadow your garden and visit it really regularly, and like make sure that you are observing all the different angles of all the different things, including like your weeds and your soil and your underside of your leaves and everything like that. So yeah, whitefly, sometimes we tell people to put what we like to call a cloche over your plant, which means like a cover, like a circular, like a covering. Sometimes you're gonna need to net something out, which is kind of a nice way to deal with a pest. Basil leaf miner is a fly that comes when you're not looking and lays its egg in your basil leaf, and then when the egg hatches, in between the layers of basil leaf, there's an egg in there. It eats all the material in between the 2 layers of leaf, and then when it's born, it hatches out and makes that black and brown bullseye scar. And so that's all already happened before you're like, what's wrong with my basil? Why does it have this bullseye on it? So the only real way to stop that cycle is to like cover, like cloche. Exclude the flying insect. And you can do that with whitefly too. You can exclude it from your plants if you really want to. I'm gonna fix it. I feel like this is crooked.
Oh, it's crooked. At the farm, I usually don't have enough time to spray. There's a couple things I really am careful about spraying for, and that one of them is the whitefly on my tomatoes. And honestly, like, I've seen really bad like tomatoes covered in whitefly in Miami. My plants never get like that. I'm like there's not an infestation, but I'm still spraying for whitefly, and I spray an organic pesticide called Microclimate that is actually a fungus that the whitefly don't like. And I'm spraying not because I give 2 craps about the whitefly on my plants. It's because they spread viruses, and so tomato viruses are the biggest thing that I have a problem with. A lot of the plants, they tend to get them when they're really small, and I wish I could have the plant nutrition to keep the whitefly off or whatever. But anyway, I'm spraying the whitefly not because I care about the whitefly, but because I didn't want plant viruses. And we'll talk a little bit more about viruses.
Like we'll just throw that in. Like, pests can also be transmitters, vectors
of things that are way worse
other
than
things that are way worse. Thrips are another great example of that. A thrip is a insect. I don't have one here, and you wouldn't be able to see it. They're teeny tiny. They look like if you took a pencil and you just made a little tiny dash. So they're like a line, a black line, and they move kind of fast, and they live on the underside of your
And the babies look way different than the adults.
And the babies look way different than the adults.
Like,
they look like tiny little worms, but they're not worms, so BT won't kill them. And those are not the worst pests to have, but they're vectors.
For the viruses.
For viruses, which
and
are
bacterial,
which are the worst pests to have. You should talk about funguses and viruses and bacteria for a second, since we're already talking about
Since we're already there. Okay, so yeah, these are the main things that I have problems with at the farm. I don't usually have a problem with insects. A lot of my plants are just growing too fast to sort of have problems with insects. But I do get fungal issues, often because of irrigation things sort of being out of whack. But okay, anyway, viral, yeah. So the main viruses we get are, I get tomato spotted wilt virus and yellow leaf curl.
Get those tomato pieces from the cart.
They should be right here, actually.
Oh,
So,
Chris has some tomato pieces.
yeah, I think some of these actually have both viruses. So this is like kind of some examples of yellow leaf curl. So the growing tip of the tomato plant is like really yellow, and the
like
veins
the
are
leaves
purple.
are very textured and curly, and like they're not supposed to look like that. Here's a good one.
Here's a good one, yeah. So and a lot of people's tomatoes end the season.
Look at that tomato leaf.
Yeah, so it's yellow, it's curly. This virus will sort of start showing itself like usually on like half the plant, which is really interesting. And it'll a lot of times it'll be like really stiff stems, and you'll start to notice this sort of this yellowing and weird interveinal stuff going on.
But like, how would somebody Google this and get the right? Like, I want to try to be like, oh look, if your plant looks like this.
Yeah, I think what's really important with the viruses is they show up usually in the terminal growth, like the growing tips, like where the plant's making new leaves come out. And so whereas a lot of problems start from the bottom up, a virus is starting from the top up. And
look at.
Yeah, so that's one I have problems with. There's nothing I can do. The plants don't have immune systems and you know the whitefly won't wear face masks. But basically the rule of thumb is if the plant's still really small and doesn't have a fruit set, I'm gonna remove it. I'm gonna get rid of that plant and take it away and throw it away and get it off the farm, because literally it'll be like one plant's infected and then the ones next to it will get infected with the virus and it'll just move through the field.
I feel like that's really important for people to really hear. Like, a farmer realizes that he has a virus plant and he pulls it out the second he can.
Yeah.
And gets it off of the property. Whereas maybe the home gardener, for emotional reasons, is like, I need to figure out a way to save my plant.
You should just go back and get a new one, or pick a different variety. Can I say a little bit more on viruses?
Yeah,
because I mean, there's a couple viruses that are, I think I just see in Homestead, but the yellow leaf curl we see everywhere, and it is brought to your plants by whitefly. And so even if your plants are really healthy and can power through the whitefly, they cannot power through the virus. And the rule of thumb is sort of once your plant is big and has a lot of fruit on it that are developed, then I would stop pulling them out. I would say just like, look, the virus is there and it's not worth it. That fruit still will ripen. It's not going to have the same quality as a plant that didn't have a virus. But at that point, like at least on my scale, you know, where I have like 500 to 1,000 plants or something like that, I got to give up someplace. It's really easy to pull a little plant out, but once they get big and they have a bunch of fruit on it, that's not going to be cost effective, you know, and they will make somewhat good fruit. Another thing with the viruses on the farm scales, some seems to be nice to be able to plant in a block versus a long skinny thing, kind of the idea that like the plants in the middle will be less likely to get the virus, and it's always the ones on the edge, because these pests, the whitefly, the thrips, they blow in, and so when you're driving around down in Homestead, you'll notice that always like the edges of the field seems to get the virus worse.
And edges have more activity on the main.
And then moving on to sort of bacterial and fungal things, we brought some cucumber leaves that we were trying to show some, but they kind of withered.
dried up a little bit.
They kind of withered, but you can see there's some the edges. this plant has a few things going on. The edges rotting is actually a different thing than the little yellow dots in the middle.
What's the edges rotting?
Anthracnose or whatever. What is that?
Anthracnose.
I always say it wrong. Okay, and then the little anthracnose, and then the little yellow dots are actually downy mildew, which looks completely different on basil. But
and then also this one has powdery mildew.
Oh, you can't really see that.
You can't really tell.
Yeah, powdery mildew is like kind of a white fuzz.
Powdery mildew is like a white fuzz, and again, people are like, what should I do? My plant has powdery mildew. A lot of times, if you just have a mature leaf, it'll just have it on it because the leaf gets to the point, like a lot of your plants are still healthy, but they have these on their older leaves. But it's caused by overhead watering, and again, like what a fungus is like, they like damp.
Yeah, there's a saying that sunshine is the best fungicide, and it's true. As if your leaves like are not getting sun, like say your tomato plant got super bushy, the leaves that are not getting the sun are going to get fungal issues. They're going to get like bacterial speck, or they're going to get late blight.
I feel like also people should know the word microclimate when thinking about, for example, they have a huge tomato. They weren't really good at pruning it through the season, and it got a little bit out of control, which is supernatural, very normal. The edges of that plant, or the parts exposed to sunlight, that's like a very different growing condition than the interior of it. And the interior of it is considered a microclimate, and the pests happening in there can be totally different than what you see on the outside. We like to talk about that like in our intro to gardening class as a way to encourage people to stay on top of keeping their tomatoes like really heavily pruned and thinned out, because once, like imagine all of a sudden being made tiny and then being transported into the center of like basically a forest made out of tomatoes. It's going to be like darker in there, it's going to be really humid, it's going to feel really safe if you're looking to like build a
like if
family.
I was a toad, I would live in there.
Yeah. And so a lot of pests will go into the interior of your plant where it's safer, moister, darker, cooler, and they'll go live in there, and funguses will do the same thing. And then it's going to also be really hard for you to pest manage that, because imagine spraying with this little wand an entire leaf, top and bottom, of a huge organism, like a big, crazy, mature tomato that has like, you know, this whole microclimate on its interior. It's like really challenging if you make an environment like that to manage it yourself.
Yeah, so I think some fungal and bacterial
What about nematode? Oh, you talked about that. I'm gonna go get some nematode plants.
Yeah, sunlight again is the best fungicide. You know, keeping your tomatoes pruned. A lot of times these issues sort of show up as just like, you know, if you wait for it to be too long, you really can't spray anything. You really can't spray that much anyway. I think one of the really common fungicides is copper, and that's really not good for the environment or the soil. And then there are some biologicals for fungal and bacteria, and I don't have a lot of experience with it, but like compost teas, you know, there's a lot of new research and stuff showing that biological compost teas work really good for these fungal and bacterial issues and for the plant's general nutrition. But that is kind of a hobby in and of itself. Like, you can't just dive right into compost teas. There are, though, a lot that are sold on the internet, especially to cannabis growers. They are very into biological controls and these compost teas. But in general, should we keep going on that stuff? Or?
Well, I want to talk about nematodes. I just got
you got the nematodes?
Okay, so look, nematodes.
Oh, jeez.
I know. Sorry. That is another really important pest to talk about for South Florida because A, they're invisible, aka microscopic, and B, they live in your soil, which means diagnosing them can be harder because you have to pull out your plant to do it. Like, you have to make the decision to kill your plant. That's why this time of year it's really good to think about nematodes, because as you're pulling spent plants out, you can inspect their root systems and be like, do I have nematodes? And then you can make decisions over the summer to try and reduce your nematode populations. Nematodes are microscopic ringworms. There's a ton of different types of them. What we're talking about is root knot nematodes. They make knots in your roots. They destroy and deform and malform your plant's root systems, and they weaken your plant. And so if you have like a tomato or a pepper or an eggplant, a long season crop, and it doesn't yield a lot and it's not really generally thriving, and especially towards the summer it decreases in health very quickly. When you pull it out, you might not be surprised to learn that you have nematodes.
But it was on its way out anyway though, right?
Right, but still, one of the reasons why in South Florida root knot nematodes are a problem is because they thrive in sandy, poor soils, which is what we have. And the other nematodes that whatever are predators for root knot, I just want to make it really simple. Root knot nematodes, they like soils that are higher in organic matter, and so their populations are lower. The population is out of balance. In a place where there's less sandy soils with more rich nutrients and more organic material present, there are still root knot nematodes, but there are so many other nematodes that they keep each other in check. But in South Florida, because of the sandy soil, we have a big root knot nematode problem. So I just pulled out like a very embarrassing Everglades cherry tomato that has been growing like kind of all season, and it's looking really bad, and I was like, I'm sure this has nematodes, because I want you guys to see the damage that it does to the roots. Okay.
That one's not even that bad though.
Yeah, but right, okay, but
it's really corky.
The roots are very corky and brittle and snappy, and they're not fibrous. Look, this root has no fibers. They're like stringier and corky, and sometimes they have little balls on them. Like, where are little balls? I guess I don't have any little balls.
I think people really have a trouble with this if they plant carrots and the carrots get stung, and then the carrots make these little roots that come out and make balls.
Gross. Okay, so what you can do about...
What can you do?
I know. Okay,
I don't know if I really believe all this that she's going to say.
Okay, well,
here,
whatever.
Go for it.
So the best way to treat nematodes is like try to get their populations back in balance. So, for example, like, go deal with him.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to add organic matter to your soil. So you need to be really good about composting and constantly adding more composted material to your garden so that the populations of the other nematodes can bring themselves back into alignment. You can also add crab meal. We sell crab meal, and when we plant tomatoes in the beginning of the season, we add crab meal to the soil where we're going to plant the tomatoes. Why are you looking at me like so skeptical? I didn't make this up. You can buy crab meal as a soil additive from Neptune's Harvest. It's like a byproduct of like the crabbing industry, and basically crab shells have a thing living on them, a population of bacteria, right? I'm gonna mess this up. Living on them that eat chitin, and chitin is the material that nematodes are made out of. So they will eat the nematodes. But you see, Chris is skeptical, but it is a no. I didn't make it up.
I just think it's really difficult for people to really like make their nematodes go away by following these guidelines. Sometimes it's
other things you can do if you have nematodes is you can make sure to plant quick crops in your area that has nematodes. Nematodes aren't terribly fast moving because they're microscopic, so they're not like an earthworm. They're not gonna like traverse your whole garden. They kind of stay in like hot spots. So you can say to yourself, hey, last year my kale was nematode. It was planted over here. I added some compost, I added some crab meal, but this year I'm gonna grow green beans there. because green beans are done making you food in 65 days, whereas kale, you want it to last the whole season. You can do stuff like that, like move your crops around.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think one of the reasons I like farming in homestead is because I've never noticed any nematode problems on my plants down there. And I don't know if that's just because they're growing real fast and they have full sun and like healthy soil or whatever. Well, it's not that healthy soil, but like for whatever reason, I just haven't noticed the nematode problems. I have a theory that we usually notice nematodes because we left an eggplant or a tomato in the ground too long, and obviously it was already a weakened plant, or a pepper, and then we pull it out and we're like, oh, we have nematodes, they're really bad. But it's like, I'm curious like how fast those nematodes actually, and I have seen it like where we'll put a transplant in a really nematode garden and like that plant will get the root knot right away. But usually I feel like it was something else happening. Like maybe that garden like never got watered and it seemed like complete sand, or it always feels like there was something else way off, and then the nematodes like were able to get at the plant. But I've just never seen like a really healthy, fast growing plant like have a problem with the nematodes.
Okay.
But it is a reason why I am sort of sand phobic. I definitely am scared of farming in sand and having a problem with the carrots or whatever. So
yeah, nematodes are a whole thing in home gardens that you guys could be looking out for this time of year, especially as you're pulling out some of your winter crops. We should talk about worms, because basically worms is a whole category of pests. A lot of people I noticed online, they want their worms ID'd.
Should we say larva? Just
larva,
so worms don't get a bad name.
Okay, larva.
Insect larva.
Insect larva. They look like worms on your plant, like little green, like squiggly things.
And so many of them feed on plant leaves.
So many feed on plant leaves. So what's happening there is an adorable plain Jane moth of some size is flittering around your garden throughout the day, and it's landing on the growing tip of your plants and planting thousands of eggs there, leaving them there, and you can't see them. And then when those eggs hatch, they turn into larvae, and those larvae are on your plant just so that when they hatch, they are born into a place where they can eat stuff, and then they eat your plant. What?
I'm trying to get it.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to show you some of my favorite worms here.
So there are a ton of different worms. I do think that for generic small green worms, identification is not that important. Like, what type of worm is this? I see a lot of what type of worm is this kind of questions online. And generic small green ones, they're all some type, or brown ones, some type of moth.
Usually a color of whatever they're eating.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're usually some type of moth larva, and they're all treated with BT. So
Bacillus thuringiensis.
Another name for BT is Bacillus thuringiensis BT. So BT is a bacteria that when it coats the bug, the larva, it like kills its digestive system, right? And it starves or something. Is that how they do it? Okay, anyways, it's organic. It's a bacteria. It feeds on the larva dies. So it, and if you don't catch worms quickly, not only will they make holes in their leaf, but Chris is obsessing over here about stem borer.
Yeah,
right?
This is a cabbage borer. A lot of people will see this on their kale plants, either on the leaves or on the stem. Basically, what you're seeing is like a bunch of brown poop, a bunch of frass.
Yeah.
And if I were to start cutting through this, we could actually find the worm there. I can see him right in there too.
This is the grossest one because it makes a tiny hole in where your leaf and your root, either right in your growing tip or where a leaf and the branch
and then
join.
It causes a bunch of rot.
It'll go in there. It's in there. It's in there. You are not going to be able to spray it. It got in your root, oh, there it is.
Yeah, here it is. And
look, Chris found it.
So there it is. It's kind of creamy with like some brown stripes on it. That's your cab. This one's really common. I hate this one. Really messes up our turnip crops or kale crops.
That'll kill you. This one will kill your plant. So this one.
Yeah, because especially on like little radishes or something,
yeah.
like it'll just take out the growing tip and.
It'll go and live in there. Live its whole life there, and it'll just eat and poop and make rot. So that's one to be really careful about. A lot of I've noticed a lot of mustards get it, and a lot of radishes get it really quick. And right now in the field here, our bok choys are getting it. You'll notice it as like a little area where a bunch of brown dots collect. And so a lot of people will accidentally identify that as something laid eggs on my plant. But if you investigate, like we're saying, like really observe, get in there, do what Chris did, open the plant, and then you find the larva in there, and you're like, okay, this is the issue that I have. Yeah. And spraying BT for worms is kind of like the same. You put it in the spray bottle and you mix it with water, like the instructions, and then you have to like spray the whole plant on the underside of the leaf and stuff. And for those guys, for example, like they go into your plant on purpose. They're so smart. They're like, they won't get me in there. Yeah. Even with the spray, you won't get them.
BT is really the only thing I think I guess the BT and the Microcontrol, but I spray the BT sort of preventatively, especially on things that I know are going to get it. Like, I know that these pest cycles have kind of these like 2-week or 28-day type of cycles, and so I know they're going to come back. I can see the little moths flying around thinking they'd be clever, so I spray it on the cucumbers and the squash because I just know they're going to get worms. And I usually focus on the growing tips, and then I'll also spray it, you know, if I'm trying to get a second cut of arugula.
That's also something that's really good to mention is like you really have to break the life cycle of some of these pests. So you can't just spray them once and then be like, I'm done. You know, I killed the worms because, for example, you didn't kill the moths. So they'll come back. Or like if I'm trying to kill thrips, I can kill the thrips with the pyganic, but the pyganic actually doesn't kill the thrips larva. So like 7 days later, I'll have mature thrips again because all of their larvae survived my last spraying. So breaking the life cycle is a nice Googleable term if you're trying to defeat a pest. I did have last year my first outbreak of fungus gnats in the nursery, which
it's a real problem.
Which is a real problem, especially for nursery operations. They're mostly nursery pests, but they're also found in a lot of indoor plants. And I went through like the whole gamut of pest management because I had never seen a fungus gnat, so I didn't know how to treat it.
Like put yourself like into graduate school of fungus gnats.
Yes.
Like
so then once
dissertation.
Right. Once I realized they were fungus gnats, then I tried to treat them, and I found something that said that BTI treats them, and I read that as BT because that's what I'm familiar with, but there's actually another strain of BT called BTI, and it's made just for mosquitoes and fungus gnats, and it's not a spray, it's a granule, and it doesn't kill the adults, it only kills the larvae, and you have to put the granule everywhere and try to convince the larvae to eat it. And then you also have to do secondary management of the adults because their population, they breed once every 5 days. It was like a whole thing, but I learned a lot about breaking the life cycle, treating the adult and the baby, and treating them very often as a way of like reducing their populations to a manageable place. I also want to mention, while we're talking about treating flying insects, this is a yellow sticky trap.
I do not recommend you use this.
What?
It always catches lizards.
Okay, look, if you hang it from something, okay, not put it on a stick, but if you can hang it from something, then the lizards won't get on it. But you could theoretically kill a lizard doing this. Unfortunately, I have killed lizards doing this. I'm not happy about it, but it's happened. Basically, yellow attracts flying insects, and so if you're having like a serious leaf miner problem, or even if you just want to learn more, people use this as a diagnostic tool in pest scouting. They're like, what's flying around here when there isn't a human here? Why don't I try and catch them? The yellow is scientifically proven to be attractive to a lot of flying insects, and so they'll come and hang out on it, and then they'll die. Again, the main issue with using a sticky trap is that it'll look like an insect buffet to like a curious lizard, and you might end up killing one or two of them. We should talk about lizards and good bugs in general, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, lizards are... Well, I think we should talk about iguanas real quick. Iguanas, okay. A lot of people that live on the water, or even not even on the water now, have iguana issues. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but basically you gotta exclude them somehow. They're kind of smart. They can tell when there's a nice plant that they want to eat. They love peppers, they love brassicas, they love papaya. They love almost any sort of tender new growth, and you can sort of see the pattern, like the way they eat a leaf. I like to imitate an iguana. Anyway, they always like leave just the stem.
Yeah, they like the tender stuff, and they'll leave almost like a skeleton.
What we do is usually build like some sort of flimsy netting structure to keep them out. That's kind of the only. And then there are more and more companies that are really good at trapping or shooting or somehow getting rid of your iguanas. If peacocks are your problem, which are kind of similar to iguanas, we've noticed that actually just sort of having nets that are sort of close together or somehow making it a difficult, like peacocks need like a takeoff and a landing strip. So if you kind of set your garden up to have like structures where like some big large winged bird is going to have difficulty getting in there, it usually works. Sometimes it's just two like parallel little fences of netting or something like that.
Yeah, iguanas are the biggest issue in gardens, I think, down here, like big pest wise, you know. In a lot of other places there's like moles and voles and rabbits and stuff. Our version of that is the iguana, which is like kind of weird and
it's
crazy.
Our deer.
It's our deer, yeah. But so you have to make fences for it. Like sometimes we'll put like two poles, very sturdy poles, not just like a piece of bamboo in the sky. We'll put like very sturdy poles on either side of the garden, and then you kind of make like a teepee out of bird netting, which is very flimsy and loose, and then you attach that to the ground with like little stakes or something so that they can't go under it, and then when they try to climb it, they can't, and also they might get like wrapped up in it, and then you catch them.
That's the worst when the little babies.
And then the other way to do it is you build a very rigid cage around the garden, and then you put flashing along the bottom, because a rigid fence is not a problem for iguanas. They'll just go right over it. But if it has like an 18-inch layer of flashing, which is basically like very thin shiny metal that they use in roofing.
It's slick, you know.
It's too slick and they can't clean it up.
They can't get their claws. You got to have something that's either too flimsy for them or too slick for them. And there's got to be enough of them. If you have big iguanas, I mean, little iguanas and big iguanas are kind of two different, can of worms.
And then everybody needs to make their own decision about like what they want to do with their iguanas. The city does encourage killing them, and it doesn't allow you to release them. So it's like if you catch one and you don't want it in your garden, it's sort of unfair to be like, but I can't handle killing it, so I'm going to go put it in someone else's garden. So not only are you making it somebody else's problem, but it's also not recommended for the environment because they're incredibly invasive. It's also illegal. And then the government, the city encourages you to kill them. A lot of naturalists and biologists and stuff also encourage you to kill them. They're very bad for seabird populations. They eat their eggs. They're really indiscriminate feeders. So they're all over the Everglades feeding on lots of things that aren't supposed to have that many predators in a balanced environment. So I've seen on the next door for my neighborhood, people get so riled up about the iguana debate. So we're not going to get into it. You can kind of tell which way we lean, but everybody needs to make their own decisions about what they're going to do with their iguanas if they catch them. Okay, so look.
And then there's also, just staying in reptiles real quick. I mean, all other garden lizards are basically just eating bugs and are totally not a problem. Some of them may be invasive, some of them may be native. But in general, it's really only the iguanas that are the omnivores and eating leaf foliage. I think tegus sometimes eat foliage, but most people don't have tegus.
We can talk about some of the really good bugs to have in your garden. Lizards are one of them, like the little brown anoles. They eat hard-bodied insects. They eat anything that they can find, so they are good. Spiders are also really good. So especially if you have like, you know, plants that are touching, or if you can make like a little bit of a jungle environment for them with like a large tomato or something.
Not too much, you still want
Not too much jungle, I know, but a little bit of stuff that they can attach to. It's really great to have spiders around. They'll kill a lot of your flying insects. And millipedes are, we get a lot of questions about millipedes. Like, help, there's millipedes in my garden. We love millipedes. Millipedes are like earthworms of the tropics. They are much better suited to our climate. They're much better suited to our climate. They're like those guys that roll up and they seem like they're empty, or they're made out of paper or something. Like, how do I need to like find?
They got 1,000 legs.
1,000 legs. There you go. But they're either brown or black with white stripes, and they go into curl. They curl up when they're scared.
I'm trying to find one.
We're looking through our mulch for them.
They're
everywhere. They also make frass, aka poop, that's like castings, earthworm castings. So you can use them to compost in your garden. And also, fun fact, people say that they swear they see them eating their plants, but they do not see them eating their plants. Millipedes are classified as detrivores, so they only eat things that are already decomposing. So if you have millipedes attacking your plant in the garden, it means that that plant has already started to decompose. That's how unhappy it is, and it's like releasing.
Yeah, it's always like in like the sad tomato plant, there's a big heavy rain. The millipedes are like little barometers, and they crawl up on the plant and they'll start eating some dead leaves up there. But your tomato plant has much bigger problems at that point.
We ran out of time.
Oh geez.
We can start another video if you guys want to keep talking about pests.
Yeah,
because we ran out of Instagram video time. Well, like, do you want to talk about some more stuff, or just close out?
Let's ask them. Do you guys want us to keep going?
You guys want us to keep talking? Because we have to start a new Instagram live if we do.
Have we done a good job?
We can do like some really quick.
Let's want to come back and do some Q&A maybe?
Okay, yeah. All right, look, we'll do it. We'll start a new video and we'll talk about some of the stuff that you guys have asked about in the comments. Because there's not that many of you left, so like, we'll answer your specific questions. We'll start a new video.
Yeah, I think the people that are left probably have some good questions.
Okay, all right.